Tonight, there are growing questions about the political situation in Russia and Vladimir Putin's future in power. Just hours ago, the Russian president made his first remarks since the rebellion led by Wagner leader Yevgeny Prigozhin on Saturday. Putin's brief 5-minute speech came after a nearly 12-minute audio recording from Prigozhin released earlier today. NBC's Keir Simmons has more from Moscow.
Tonight, President Vladimir Putin addressing a nation, but focusing on one man, while never mentioning militia commander Yevgeny Prigozhin by name, slamming what he called a militarized mutiny committed by traitors. All after that defiant new message from Prigozhin, whose rebellion rocked Russia, insisting he did not try to topple President Putin, but was protesting how his Wagner Group troops were being treated. Prigozhin last seen last Saturday night in the back of an SUV, cheered by crowds, his whereabouts still unknown, after a deal to end the rebellion. Prigozhin has been in a fierce power struggle with the Russian Defense Minister Shoigu, who he accuses of trying to undermine Wagner troops in Ukraine. Russia releasing this short video of Shoigu today with no indication when or where it was recorded. An extraordinary 72 hours that all began Friday night, around 10:30 local time. Prigozhin calling for a march for justice into Russia, not a coup, he insisted. By 7:30 Saturday morning, Prigozhin, facing little resistance, takes over Russia's military headquarters in Rostov-on-Don, berating two Russian senior commanders, demanding they hand over Shoigu. President Putin then going on national television, accusing Prigozhin of treason, vowing to put down the uprising. By Saturday afternoon, Wagner troops are on the move to Moscow. At one point, video showing them just 289 miles from the capital. But on Saturday night, that mysterious deal is made. Prigozhin's march to Moscow is dramatically halted. A former Russian deputy foreign minister telling us it highlights Russian action in Ukraine.
The people are asking more and more the questions, why it's so long, why it's so long.
We spoke to Russians in Moscow tonight. What happens now, do you think?
I don't know.
And late today, President Biden on his message to Russia.
We made clear that we were not involved. We had nothing to do with it.
The Wagner Group recently played a major role in securing a key battlefield victory for Russia in Ukraine. But as the New York Times notes, the Wagner Group's revolt means their future as a fighting force for the Kremlin may now be in question. I want to bring in my dear friend and partner, Ali Velshi. He is in Ukraine's capital of Kyiv, where it is 6 a.m. Ali, thank you for being there, but thank you for being here with us so early. And Michael McFaul, former U.S. ambassador to Russia. Ambassador, I'm so happy you're here as well, but I just so appreciate Ali being there. So, Ali, I want to start with you. What is your biggest takeaway from Prigozhin's comments?
Well, first of all, Keir points out a number of things in that story that he just did, and that is we're not 100% sure where Prigozhin is. The deal was that he was supposed to go to Belarus. Belarus, by the way, is about 60 miles from where we are. Many of the attacks on Ukraine, while a lot of them are from the Black Sea in the east, many of them come from Belarus. If an airplane takes off from a field in Belarus armed with hypersonic missiles, that missile can be in Kyiv in 20 minutes. So Belarus is in Russia's pocket. There's an actual goal that Russia and Belarus sort of become a union of countries by 2030. Lukashenko, the president of Belarus, is not an independent actor. It's implausible that he negotiated a deal between Prigozhin and Putin. But we're not sure where Prigozhin is. Vladimir Putin has come out and given a few speeches in a few days. He definitely seems embattled. He seems angry. Today he seemed very angry. And the important point is that Prigozhin and the Wagner Group were the tip of the spear for a lot of the Russian field activity in Ukraine. There's a lot of missiles and drones, but for the wars that are being fought in the eastern part of this country, Prigozhin and his team were thought to be better equipped and better fighters than the Russian military are. They're gone, and it's not clear now whether they will ever work for the Russian government again. Putin has said they will absorb those who are not in rebellion as part of the Russian military, but we're not sure whether that's going to be good or bad. The takeaway here is that the Ukrainians are looking at this thinking, you know what, our enemy, our adversary, our invader They're in disarray. That's probably good for Ukraine. There's one danger, Stephanie, and that is that Vladimir Putin looks like a weakened man. And if he needs to reassert himself and look strong, Ukraine may be the target for that.
And Ambassador, could Prigozhin look for ways to help Putin do just that? Last night, General Barry McCaffrey said Prigozhin is a dead man. He has a target on his back. Putin will take him out. So could Prigozhin be scrambling to get back in Putin's good favor? If, in fact, he is in Belarus, could he try to launch an attack on Ukraine from there or with the help of Belarus?
Maybe, but I'm skeptical for the one reason, because of what Putin talked about tonight. He gave this speech. It was a 5-minute speech, but it was aimed at dividing Prigozhin and his other commanders from the other fighters of the Wagner Group. By the way, that's exactly what Prigozhin was trying to do several days ago when he was trying to tell the normal soldiers of the Russian conventional army that their commanders, General Gerasimov in particular, had been lying to him. Putin said the same thing because he's trying to split them apart, because he's worried about them, that they haven't disarmed, they haven't gone into the conventional forces. And the fact that he had to get back on television tonight, not to reassure all of the Russian people that everything is in order. That's what an American president would do.
Right.
He was explicitly trying to divide the Wagner forces. That suggests that there's not a big future for Prigozhin close to Putin.
Ali, you agree?
Yeah, in fact, I was going to say that's important. You notice these two guys are giving speeches, or in Prigozhin's case, posting audio to social media, but they're talking. They're talking at each other. They're attacking each other. If you're a Russian pro-democracy person, you're an opposition leader, you're an average Russian citizen, it's not clear what's going on. It sounds like a fight between these two guys. And if you're an autocrat and a dictator, it's a bad look. Not only is Putin an autocrat, he's the autocrat of all autocrats, right? The whole world is looking to him, and he looks weak. It looks like an attempted coup. Prigozhin, by the way, never used that language. He didn't say he was targeting Putin. It's the Russians who have said this was a rebellion. This was an attempted coup. So this is going to be a tough one to solve. But at the moment, Vladimir Putin is looking weak. And it's not just the Russian audience he's got to be worried about there. It's the Ukrainian people, and it's the rest of the world who are saying, wow, if this can happen after 23 years of having an iron fist in Russia, anything's possible now.
Ambassador, what are you hearing from your contacts in Russia?
Well, most of my contacts in Russia are in jail or abroad these days. But the debate in Russia is exactly what Ollie just said. Think about as this has happened in our country, right? The fighting forces are coming towards the Capitol. They say they're going to take over the Pentagon. The president gets on TV and says, I'm going to crush these guys. And then 5 hours later, he does a deal with them. And then 2 days later, he says,
right,
hey, guys, you're still heroes. Put down your arms and join us, but overthrow your leaders like Prigozhin and the other leaders. That does not feel very secure, right? That feels pretty alarming. And I'm especially interested in one more audience to add to the audiences. Russian soldiers currently occupying Ukraine. How does this feel for them?
Right.
Their commanders are being told that they're corrupt, and then their commanders are saying they're going to fight and crush the rebellion, and then they don't. Why are they still fighting? Prigozhin told them that their commanders are corrupt. Why are they still there? If I were worried about one thing in particular, if I were Vladimir Putin, I would be worried about morale of those fighting forces occupying Ukrainian territory right now.
Mr. Velshi?
Yeah, and actually there's like a hotline and an app here in Ukraine that Russian soldiers can use to message to the Ukrainians that they're prepared to surrender. Prigozhin also said to his forces that the whole premise of this war was a lie. The denazification of Ukraine was a lie. He's not only telling them that they're being dishonest with them, he's saying that the whole premise is wrong. So you had a demoralized force. Remember, a lot of these Russian military soldiers that McFaul is talking about were conscripts. They're not really soldiers. They don't really want to be here in the first place. They're in this country up against completely newly remoralized Ukrainian troops. The Ukrainian troops are feeling like they're gaining ground. They've got the world behind them. They've got much more equipment and ammunition than they thought. They're going to get those F-16 jets. Some of those tanks are on the ground. More are coming. They feel like the wind is at their back. And if you are a Russian soldier in Ukraine, this is a dark weekend. It's been a dark weekend for you, and it's not clear what the future is.